Loud. Great. So here we are. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. My name is Adrian Kosmaczewski. We are on Thursday, January 21st, 2021. So today is the 21st day of the 21st year of the 21st century. So in a few minutes, it will be the 21st minute of the 21st hour of the same day. So it will be a very, I don't know if you are superstitious, you might want to play blackjack tonight. Anyway, thanks a lot for joining. We are here on the first GitLab Switzerland meetup, organized together between GitLab and Vision. For those of you who might not know Vision, basically this is how you pronounce the name, by the way, the name of the company. We are experts in everything that has to do with DevOps, Docker, and Kubernetes. That's basically what we do. We take care of applications running on the cloud, 24/7 support. And of course, we've got a whole lot of partnerships. One of those, a very important one for us, is GitLab, of course. And we also run our own container platform called Apuyo, based on OpenShift. And we develop Project Sin as well to help us manage all of these systems. But enough about Vision. The agenda of the day, it's very simple and very complex at the same time. We are thrilled to have Michael Friedrich. He's developer evangelist at GitLab. He's got a whole lot of experience about GitLab, very bad lapsus about GitLab. And we are thrilled to have him on board, and he will give a whole introduction about GitLab and all of its capacities. And having said that, I leave the stage to Michael. So I stop sharing, and Michael, the stage is yours. So just one thing while you're sharing your screen, everybody, please feel free to use the Q&A box on Zoom to post your questions as we move forward. Michael will basically answer them either during or after, but please feel free to participate. Thank you so much. So, Michael, the stage is yours.
Thanks. Before we start, I've shared the slides with you so you can follow along. Everything we do today will be live, and you can try it out or try it out later on. I'm really happy to be here and to have the opportunity to share some wisdom, some best practices with you as a starter with GitLab, and also maybe some advanced topics around CI/CD, security, and so on. I know that probably after a while, 30 minutes or 40 minutes, one might get tired of Zoom or something around this. So if you have a question or anything around it, totally shoot it in the chat. And there are also there are exercises which are at the end of the slide deck, which should encourage you to just take half an hour of your time later on and practice a little and get to know GitLab by just using it and exploring what's possible. And this is the right window. A little bit about myself before we start. Yeah, I'm a developer evangelist since March 2020. Before that, I was involved for around about 11 years in open source monitoring, development, and backend engineering. I do love community support, social media, Twitter, everything else. Originally from Austria, grew up in Linz, moved to Vienna, moved to Nuremberg in Germany, where I'm still staying, but right now I'm all remote with GitLab. You can find me as DNS Michi on social media, on Twitter, everything else. Yeah, and when I don't hack or when I don't do GitLab, I do love building Lego models, which certainly often is a problem because my flat is not that big. But yeah, it's still fun to build Lego. And moving along with GitLab, first off, I want to give a short introduction what we're going to do. Then I think Arnold's not muted. First steps with GitLab, then a little bit about CI/CD, getting started, jumping into a Go project to practice a little, then some outlooks or some tryings with security scannings with GitLab, a little bit about deliver and deployment, and an outlook. And last but not least, I've also prepared some exercises for asynchronous practice. And we can totally try it out live, or we just like keep discussing what else is cooking, because probably I could talk about GitLab 24 hours, but we just have 2 hours, but 2 hours is still long. Just for you, if you want to follow along with the exercises from the slides, you need a GitLab.com account, and all the exercises will be done within the Web IDE and the editor, so you don't need any shell access or terminal around this. First things first, this repository is public, and we will be working on it throughout the workshops and the exercises, and you need to fork it into your own account, and then you're good to go. You can also use the presentation, the slides, the exercises for your own workshops or for your own ideas to spread the word, explain things to colleagues, to your friends, and even getting inspired from like best practices or things you learned from today. Okay, so this is one of the what is GitLab overview slides. GitLab as a company was founded in 2014. We're happy to have many open source contributors. So there is a community edition and an enterprise edition. And basically it evolved over time from just managing source code, which is Git, into a whole collaboration suite and the DevOps lifecycle in a way of like from the first code to the production deployment and everything around it with reporting, monitoring, security, and whatnot. So it's growing fast in the market. Some more technical insights into GitLab, and this is just a summary which I brought up over the years myself when I was creating GitLab trainings in the past. You communicate with your Git client over HTTPS or SSH. You have the GitLab interface, which is either the REST API as an HTTPS endpoint, which you can use for literally anything, which means, for example, creating users, doing monitoring, automate tasks, which could probably be done manually otherwise. And you have, of course, the user interface for everything else and deeper collaboration and development. From the backend, you probably won't see anything when you're using the self-hosted Omnibus packages installer, but just getting a better picture of what technology is in the background. So basically, it uses Ruby on Rails. So also if you would consider contributing to GitLab, knowing Ruby on Rails definitely helps. It's using Puma as the default web server with Nginx. PostgreSQL is the backend. Redis for caching. Server-side rendering is done with Node.js. And all the daemons which take care of specific high-performance tasks are written in Golang. For example, the GitLab CI CD runner, which we will learn about today, GitLab for Git cluster management, and also the release CLI and so on. All these components are fully packaged into Omnibus, which is kind of a chef recipe in the background, and it works during upgrades very, very nice. So you don't need to care about like, does the database upgrade work? No, but instead you need to be prepared. For the first steps with GitLab, I would totally recommend to just like, for example, start with the dashboard, get an overview, what's in there, explore the menu header with the actions, figure out what's inside. You might, it looks familiar to GitHub and other Git web UIs, I would say, but it's the main entry point, and knowing where to click and knowing which, for example, keyboard shortcuts are being useful can totally help. The other thing which is important is within your profile, you have the possibility, of course, to set a nice picture. You can also add your biography, and the most important thing is within your settings, you can manage all the access stuff, which means, for example, adding your public key for SSH or creating a personal access token for HTTP access, which you will need for anything, for any integration, for example, with Visual Studio Code and the GitLab workflow extension or anything else. Another thing is everything which means you want to organize something, aside from the projects hosting the Git repositories, you can create multiple levels of groups, which makes the organization easier. Like nested subgroups are possible. And the good thing is if you need to find granular permissions, you can actually do that from the group level or from the subgroup level and saying, hey, for example, the main community relations team has, I think we have developer access or maintainer access, but then specifically I can grant, for example, ownership to the evangelist program in the screenshot. The other nice thing is you can mention a group in issues, merge requests, and comments, which means you don't need to remember whom you want to tag. It's just like add and typing the group name, autocomplete, and then you're done. Another thing when getting started and getting familiar with like planning your GitLab instance and overviews are the issue lists and also the issue boards, especially because you can have quite a lot of issues over time, and you might see it on the GitLab project itself, where we have, I think, 35,000 issues, and we don't really look at the issue list on its own, but we use searches, or actually filtered searches, URLs, issue boards, and other ways to look and plan for the future and the future releases. So this is a good way to, for once, practice the filters and then later on store them in issue boards, Kanban boards, roadmaps, burn down charts, and so on. Yeah, and another thing I want to highlight, I'm not doing the lab right now. It's just more of an introduction. You can, of course, do it live as I talk along, using issue templates. And this is one of the things where you don't want to play like ping pong. When I'm opening a bug report or an issue, feature request or feature proposal, I want to get a list of instructions, what's needed to reproduce the problem, to, for example, get some ideas. I'm saying, hey, this feature looks in a competitor product like this, and we totally want to do it like this, and that's some visuals, some designs, and whatnot. And this is easily doable with so-called description templates, which can be used for issues, merge requests, and also epics within GitLab. And it makes it easier to collect, for once, feedback from the own development team, or if you're looking into opening up the repository for open source contributions, it also helps. Other than that, next to issues on its own, you want to organize it probably in a roadmap. And one of the ways you can do so is by using milestones. So you can create a new milestone, use a semantic versioning system mapped to the later on release, and assign issues to those milestones. This is one of the ways you can organize this. And another thing of organization with issues are so-called labels. Like you can use them for filters in issue boards or in issue lists, but also they have a visual helper thing around, which means you can immediately spot a bug because the label is red as a background, for example. So they have a signal color thing inside. The other thing is you can also use like prefix or even scoped labels, meaning to say you can define workflows, for example. So We have labels around we're getting a request, then the request is new, later on it's open, then it's like in progress, and then it's closed down or done or accepted or whatever is needed. GitLab provides a default set of labels, which is nice. One thing I would recommend is, or which is also possible, not what I would recommend, you can also define a group level setup, a group. You can define group labels. So the labels are then inherited to the project and you don't need to manage them on each project. The other thing, and this is something which we will practice in the next minutes, we have the static site editor and also the web IDE. The web IDE looks like Visual Studio Code or some other editors, and it's super easy, super convenient to just like fix a typo in the documentation or in the code, edit it, create a new merge request, or like work in the web interface in the browser, avoid any context switches, and you don't need to clone the repository. You can just work within GitLab. This is one of the things. The other thing, especially for starting with GitLab, is checking out the project activities. Sometimes it's a little bit hidden because there are many features, but you can view the global activity like on GitLab.com, or you could also go into the project specific overview and say, hey, I want to check out this activity. I've lost something, or I didn't remember what's going on. So there's a way to look into that, and you can also see what's going on with GitLab as a project, for example. Arno, can you mute yourself, please? Yeah, last but not least, we have the to-do lists. Every time you, for example, are tagged, so you are mentioned, or you get an assignment of a merge request or a CI/CD build failed or something else around this is like a to-do for you, and you can then say, hey, it's done. You can filter by it. And this is basically one of my workflows at GitLab when we use GitLab to create GitLab, just to like keep everything in a single place. And I'm barely reading my emails, for example. Okay, now from the basics with GitLab as a management system and project management and source code, the core part, or one of the biggest parts, is CI/CD. So continuous integration, continuous deployment, continuous delivery, and just to like get a better picture, get an overview. There are some like key concepts to understand. Like a job in a CI/CD pipeline means you want to execute a certain set of commands, which produce some outputs, some exit codes, and like the overall state, which should be presented later on. The pipeline groups those jobs into specific stages, where one job triggers another job and so on. Like similar, like you would be creating, for example, a car, and the manufacturing goes on from like the basic skeleton to the doors and so on. And you also want to ensure that, for example, there are not like two left doors being built into the entire car. So at a certain point of failure, the jobs should cancel the entire pipeline. Another thing to know is that there are environments for specific deployments. For example, you could use a staging environment, a dev environment, a production environment. And in order to instrument or parameterize the jobs, you would, for example, use environment variables, which can be helpful to say, hey, I want to trigger the pipeline for my iOS build or for my Android builds, or like specify a specific software version which should be checked out. You can also hide credentials inside environment variables, which are then being edited in the project settings or in the group settings, hidden away from public access, of course. Yeah, the aforementioned outputs are so-called job artifacts, anything which can be useful, be it either job log output or a metrics report, security report, binary packages, tarballs, anything you can imagine, actually. Last but not least, the CI runner or the GitLab CI/CD runner. CI runner, it's a historical thing, renaming that to CI/CD. This is basically the engine or the power horse which actually executes the jobs and communicates with the GitLab server. So in theory, you could, for example, install the GitLab runner written in Go on your MacBook, on your Windows desktop, or just like on Linux. The other thing to mention is you can also use auto-scaling with the runner, which means you don't need to run all the resources in your cloud environment all the time, which would totally explode your total costs in a month. But to say, hey, when there is a certain bottleneck or there are too many jobs in the queue currently, I can just say, like in Hetzner Cloud or in AWS or wherever needed, spin up new virtual machines, then the jobs are getting executed, and when they're idle again, shut it down to a specific limited number. The other way to scale it is to use Kubernetes and instrument and orchestrate the containers there. Either use it with hosted Kubernetes or managed Kubernetes, which is available, for example, in AWS, in GCP, in Azure, wherever you can imagine, or use it in your own managed Kubernetes environment or project or whatever you want to use. The other thing to mention about GitLab CI/CD runners is you can assign them dedicated to a project or a specific group, use then tags, or have them globally in a pool, which could be, for example, shared runners, as you can see on GitLab.com. And this can get handy when you, for example, have on the left-hand side C++ projects, which needs lots of resources for compiling and building, and of course more resources then. And on the other side, the front end is written in, let's say, PHP, and it doesn't need so many resources to build the code and to compile it. You don't compile it to like create a release package, for example. It doesn't need so many resources, and you can use tags to assign the runners where needed. Other than that, for the naming, the CI pipeline, you commit something, you build something, you run unit tests, integration tests, which is basically what we call continuous integration. And then you have sort of delivery. So you, for example, prepare a release, you automatically deploy it in production. And from the deployment standpoint, you probably want to do certain reviews aided by review apps, like deploying the current Git branch into a Kubernetes cluster and reviewing it if everything works fine. Then a staging environment and production. This is like a screenshot of how a pipeline could look like. And there are way more things than I can explain in this short amount of time, what you can do with pipelines. The simplest iteration or the simplest way to use pipelines is you define like build, test, stage in production. You have a synchronous pipeline, which is blocking. But there are other ways to make use of advanced pipelines with asynchronous dependencies, like the directed acyclic graph you might encounter throughout the docs. There's the possibility to have multi-project pipelines. You can have parent-child pipelines, which generate CI configuration code for other pipelines, which are then executed. This is something I call pipeline inception. Or, for example, merge trains, which kind of assume, or how to explain that, you have lots of changes running into your main or master branch, and oftentimes something breaks or fails. And merge trains are basically like a queue where it simulates what if all the merge requests in the queue have been merged and mine on top, would it fail or not? And I get the result of that. There's a blog post out there written by Vitika. I need to look up the URL later on, which totally explains that nicely. But anyhow, for getting a little deeper into like actually practicing GitLab and GitLab CI/CD, normally or typically when you start working on an issue, you create a Git branch, you commit your changes, you create a merge request, which can be a draft or work in progress, so that everyone knows that you're working on this. Then the CI pipeline executes tests. You get immediate feedback during your development process, not just when everything gets merged later on. And you can, for example, react on code quality problems. There could be certain security tests telling you that you probably leaked an AWS credential in your unit test right now. And at a later stage, when you say, okay, I'm confident enough, I want to ask for a review, assigning it to a colleague. The review process starts, peer review, discussion, everything around it. Someone approves the changes and it gets merged back to the main or master branch. The CI pipeline runs and deploys it. And even though you want to, for example, monitor the application, which also can be done in the merge request, for example, and you get an idea of, oh, this Git commit actually increased the memory usage by 1,000%. We, for example, cannot merge that. This is also like a possibility you can implement into your CI/CD process or pipelines. But I'm talking too much. We need to do something. The first step with GitLab CI/CD is, and this is what I would recommend, just like keeping things simple. And the most simplest example is to just, I want to spawn a job with a new container image. We're using Docker in that regard. I want to use Alpine, which is, I think, 20 megabytes of memory footprint. The colon latest means just using the latest tag, which is available. And then there is like the free form for job names. So there are certain keywords on the first level in YAML in the configuration. But for example, the job name test_simple is free for, and the job has a requirement of executing a script. So, oops, this is a script, and it should execute something. And the dash is basically a YAML array or YAML list. And this is something we want to do or want to try out now. So in order to do that, I'm switching over to the repository. And I want to use the web IDE and just waiting here. I want to add a new file. This is basically over here. And I want to use the .gitlab-ci.yaml because I'm lazy. And here I want to use image, and it has auto-completion. I want to use Alpine latest, and the job was called, I think, test simple. And nice thing is that the indent works, and we say exit 1. So, and this is basically it. Over here, I have the possibility to commit it and say add CI config. I want to create a new branch, which I call CI config, and I want to create a merge request. So it's not immediately pushed to the main or master branch, but instead pushed into a merge request. And this basically looks good. I'm more interested in showing you how the pipeline works. So in this example, we can see that the pipeline is being run. And when I, for example, click on this, I can navigate into the pipeline overview and then see test simple. This is the job which is being executed, and it did something. So I pulled the Alpine Docker image, prepared the repository, and called exit1. One is an error code, so everything above 0 actually is an error code. Whenever you use that, or when you execute something and it would produce an error code or an error, and you just want to capture the output, for example, for creating some unit test reports or some performance tests, you need to ensure that the right exit code is being returned, because otherwise the job would fail. In that regard, when I want to navigate back to my merge request, I have it linked over here. And to show you that it works, I can go into the web ID. And in that example, I don't want to use the diff view, but just edit it and say, hey, let's just pretend that we're going to fix this and fix CI config, committing this. And then I can see, for example, over here at the bottom, that the pipeline is being run. And the nice thing is it opens up on the right-hand side. And while I would be, for example, continuing working on something in the web ID, I can totally inspect what's going on over here. Or just click here and say, hey, I want to see it in the bigger picture. And in that regard, it was exit 0, everything is green. The first steps worked. Moving back, this is the second exercise, which we did already now. Another way of dealing with the CI configuration or CI/CD configuration is to use variables to instrument or to define a different behavior within the jobs and the executed scripts. And this is one way of doing that. The global variables keyword can be used within the CI configuration. You can also specify them on the job level, or if it's, for example, credentials or something else you want to mask in the outputs, which should be sensitive information, for example, you can specify them in the project settings, and only the owners have access to that information. But for example, the developer role does not have access to that. Typical example would be, for example, MySQL root password for testing, or something else in that area. Yeah, this is one of the home exercises for you, because I want to jump into actual code right now and gonna see how we can jumpstart the Go project. The thing is, the repository which we're using for our exercises contains some Go code. There is a main.go as an entry point. We have some logging inside and anything else. The main idea is, for example, if you're starting with GitLab CI/CD, maybe you have imported it from SVN, from a migration, or you got the code from someone else, and you're not really sure if it works or if the unit tests perform or something else. So the first entry point, and I do the same when I find a project and it doesn't have any CI/CD around it, I want to add GitLab CI/CD to it and see if, for example, the code is building, dependencies are fulfilled, and anything around it. So the first step in our Go project will be now to try to build the Go code. And this is like the verbose instructions, what we're going to do now. We will be adding or like creating the GitLab CI configuration again. And this time we will be using a template, not to avoid to type too much, and editing some things like the repo name, and also replacing the my binary thing with Tanuki. And then we're gonna commit it and see how things go. So I'm navigating back into the main repository. and we didn't merge the merge request now, but just again, fresh repository, we're adding a new file, calling it GitLab CI. And in this case, I'm navigating over here, choosing a template and saying, hey, I'm looking for Go, and I just want to use Golang. And I will dive into the details in a bit. I just want to make it run. One thing we should change is the repo name, which is, I need to use this one. This is the repository name, and in your fork, it should be a little different. I think it doesn't really matter, but I'm just doing it for sanity. This will create a symlink, and this week in a separate workshop, I ran into the problem. Avoid any trailing slashes. This looks correct, but I kind of removed this one without deleting HTTPS, of course. And my binary is over here, and replacing this with Tanuki, and this one as well. Okay, and once I've done this, I should be good to go. I want to add CI config for Go project. And this is CI-Go, and creating a new merge request again. This merge request is fine, submit it, and I want to inspect the pipeline. And while the pipeline is running, I can also open it up in the web IDE again. No, not the view, this one. So basically what is going on, it prepares the Go path. To be honest, I cannot really explain it. The most important thing is there are stages defined. So we will see specific jobs later on. And we have the test, build, and deploy stage. So they are executed in this order. And jobs can be assigned to a stage by using the stage keyword in the job. So format is a job and compile, and it executes a script. So this script, for example, runs go format, does some other syntax checks, and then actually calls the test instruction. And the compile stage, for example, builds a static binary, which is output as Tanuki. And since we might want to inspect that, the artifacts keyword defines everything which is defined as a job artifact, and job artifacts are uploaded by the GitLab runner to the GitLab server, and we can access that from the web interface, for example. Or we could totally use the REST API and some automation and download the artifacts from jobs, for example. Okay, this is in my merge request, which is linked over here, and it failed. Oh, okay. Let's probably inspect that and see where it failed, and we can see the format job failed, and the compile job wasn't even triggered by that. So it failed fast, which is a good sign. And the formatting was fine, but the dependencies or the includes didn't work. And in this example, it's in main.go in line 12. So we totally should check it out. And there is something broken. If I navigate back into my merge request now and open up the web IDE again, I want to go into the main.go. I have set line number 12, which is os.get.end. And it's obviously it's intended to break because the imports are missing. And in order to make this exercise as easy as possible, we can just remove the commented out source code, import the FMT package, which is used for the print line, and OS is retrieving environment variable, which you can, for example, pass from the CI/CD variables as an exercise. And this should fix the source code. Let's commit it into the same branch and saying fix missing Go imports and commit it. Wait for the pipeline to go on, and hopefully it builds nicely all along. If you run, for example, into scaling issues and the job takes ages, for example, to pull in the Docker image, maybe you've hit the rate limit, for example, from Docker Hub, there are ways to optimize that in a specific sense of either using a local registry, using the dependency proxy for caching, assigning more resources, auto-scaling to the GitLab runners. You can also, for example, use a GitLab.com account and register your own runners. So, for example, yesterday in our Everyone Can Contribute coffee chat, we tried Hetzner Cloud with auto-scaling, which also worked nicely indeed. In this regard, the job succeeded. So everything was fixed, and I'm expecting, or we can expect, that the pipeline is executing the compile job. And this again passes over any things. Yeah, now it's a different stage. Yeah, it should pass the artifacts. And this is typically the time where someone gets a coffee, which I totally have. Okay, the job succeeded, and it generated the Tanuki binary and uploaded it to the coordinator, which is the GitLab server. And over here we can see there are job artifacts. On coffee here, I fetched a beer. Yeah, I totally agree on that. It's after 4 p.m. The Tanuki binary is over here, and if you, for example, on a Linux host, you could also execute that. I cannot do that on macOS, but I could add a cross build or something else. The thing is, I don't want to do that. I want the GitLab CI/CD to execute it and see if it's segfaults or if there are any problems at runtime. And one of the things I can do is to navigate back to our exercises, and I want to add a new job, which should be run, which is called run, should be executed in the deploy stage, simulating a deploy or a production run. And it should just execute the Tanuki binary, which was produced by the previous job. But in order to do that, we can navigate back into the web IDE and ensure that we're inside the merge request. So in order to do it from a fresh start, I'm gonna go into the merge request, which is this one. And it's great to see that everyone is practicing. Going over here into the web IDE again, and now not to defute this one, adding a new job. Let's call it run. Stage is deploy, and script is --./Tanuki. Yeah, and this should then build at Tanuki run CI job. Okay. And then again, we can see we have another job which is being run, and this triggers the pipeline again. So it's like you have you don't have any like mixed up together testing environments. It's like you have the first job, it runs again and again and again, and you get immediate feedback if something is broken. In that example, it runs and runs. Let me just see what else is coming. Yeah, while it runs, there are other possibilities you probably want to use within CI/CD, and one of the examples could be running unit tests. Unit tests, I think we have too many programming languages. It differs all along, so there are different frameworks, mocks, things to do it. Go has it built in, nicely done. And it's also possible, for example, to generate coverage reports, so the test coverage, and then use the JUnit integration in GitLab, which parses the XML report and provides a nice overview within the pipeline view, where you can see, oh, the tests have been run, which ones have been failed, and so on. The unit tests are also important, for example, when you have a merge request workflow and the tests are failing. This is a sign for the reviewers to just leave it there and say, hey, the developer knows, got a notification email and a notification to do in GitLab itself. They need to fix the test. And once it's ready, someone else will do the review, for example. This is a way to ensure that resources are being added efficiently. So just see if everything worked out now. This is the wrong tab. This is the right tab. The job was executed. Nice. And if it executed nicely, we should see the Tanuki, our rainbow Tanuki, which is printed over here. So everything is done. If you see it too, I would love to see it on social media for you to share. Tag GitLab or tag DNSMehi. Yeah, and so we can enjoy what's possible. You can also send, for example, improvements to this repository or something else. And this was for CI/CD. The other thing, and this was basically the exercise which I did 30 minutes before the workshop. I wanted to show you something which is new and which we totally would love you to try out. Is a new pipeline editor from the accessible from GitLab from the web UI. It's live on GitLab.com and it should be out in the first iteration tomorrow when 13.8 is released on the 22nd. And in order to not just look at the screenshot, we can use, let me see, navigating back into the repository. You probably have seen it already. There is a file called .gitlab-ci.solution.yaml, which contains everything which we are doing today and a little bit more than that as a solution for you to like verify if everything worked out. And we're going to use this solution to create an initial working GitLab CI, in the GitLab CI configuration. This is currently needed for the editor, so it shouldn't be too much to worry about. The easiest thing is, and this is like an advanced pattern you can use with the CI configuration, you can use includes, and for example, include a local file, which is GitLab-CI is, cannot type today, solution YAML. For example, you could also import existing templates for code scanning, CI security. You can define remote files from a different HTTPS endpoint and so on. And in this regard, I just want to include this and push it actually to the main branch to have it available in there. And this is just a way to show it to you. We have it now. I just want to navigate back in the main review. The pipelines are being run, but instead I want to navigate over here, open up the editor, and this is the first iteration. The most interesting part is actually a visualization of which jobs would be executed. And probably you're wondering why there are so many test jobs right now. The thing is, there are security templates included, and they generate jobs for you. So you just include a template, and you get everything which is needed for security. This is under heavy development, I would say. Well, like everything is under heavy development. This is the first iteration, and we're totally planning for more. I need to find the epic where we are asking for feedback. Maybe just do a short hop onto Twitter, onto my profile, because I have the tweet pinned and there is the epic. So I can share it with you for feedback. And I would totally invite you to try it out. Let us know what you think, what you're missing. Yeah, and also the nice thing is it has live linting, so you don't need to commit and wait for the YAML error, which could be totally like you cannot drink as much coffee as you want to. Okay, this is this example, and just for the sake of completeness, I will reset that later on. But one thing I also wanted to show you, and we already did it now, is to like, what can I do about CI security or security in general, for example, to detect any secrets, for example, like an AWS credential or specific password or something else which could be hidden in your Git history. This is, for example, a way to make use of GitLab. And the other way is secrets is one thing. The other way is, for example, static application security testing. So detecting whether you use chmod 777 for some reason on a file, or maybe there you are not closing any file descriptors, which could lead into potential Stack Overflow, whatever attacks. And yeah, basically things you probably do not expect, even with like dynamic application security testing, chaos engineering, and the like. And I think, let me just see in the repository right now, do we have a security? Oh, it's over here. In our security dashboard, do we have a vulnerability report right now? That's a list. Oh, okay. I could open up. Oh, what did happen? The pipeline failed for some reason. Yeah, of course it failed. We didn't merge the merge request now. Okay, then let's. Probably I shouldn't have added the exercise last minute. Let's fix that live. Go into our Go project again and edit the web IDE, not the web, edit the CI configuration, and yeah, just do this again, what I did before. Include, you could also use a shortcut and just include it like this, even though the web IDE doesn't like it. Include this over here and add full CI security jobs, and this should be run then. Go over here and okie dokie, we want to view the pipeline again, and waiting while this is being run. The screenshots show the integration into the merge request, and this is currently available in GitLab Ultimate in the enterprise version. If you, for example, want to automate it or use it in the lower tier, you could also use the artifacts for the JSON reports which are generated, and for example, trigger the API, add a comment into the merge request, build your own report system. This is totally doable. And while this is being run, we can just hop over what else is possibly interesting. And I think I'm a little over time, but so much things to tell. Auto DevOps is something you probably want to try out. It's an opinionated set of CI templates abstracted away. The idea is that you don't really need to care about dependencies for Python, for Go, for anything else. It tries, or it attempts to build everything for you, deploys it, pushes it into the container registry, and the first iteration worked with Kubernetes workloads, and most recently AWS has been added to auto deploy, I think in one of the recent versions. And you don't have to like look into a specific CI configuration that much. The other thing is like everything you can use for security testing, like secrets testing and static application security testing would be something I would totally recommend to enable as default. Dynamic application security testing is where you, for example, penetrate an REST API with like malformed input and try to trigger memory exceptions or something else which breaks the application or even leaks something. Dependency scanning is also one of the big parts where you want to explore, or you cannot really control when you're using Node.js, for example, and the reverse dependency included a CVE and exploits your entire production system. You totally want to prevent that and say, hey, whenever a dependency is being bumped or it's detected having a vulnerability, you want to get feedback on that and fix that. Container scanning falls under the same like direction. Oftentimes you're using a base image which gets vulnerabilities and CVEs assigned, and you want to detect that. For example, using Debian Buster in the 0 release has certain kernel problems, I think. Totally normal, but you need to take care about this and be aware of possible problems in the underlying Docker image, for example. Fuzz testing is totally new, which means like chaos input, chaos engineering, no human tests, and everything around it. I would totally recommend to explore it. And before I jump into what's next, is it being run? It's not entirely complete yet, but let's inspect it. Security scanning is loading. Maybe we have a chance to look into it. Can I view the full report? The full report is more interesting. So in this case, it detects an AWS key, for example. This one is, I want to have more info on that. And I can see, for example, that's in the .end file. So I obviously added a .end file where it's inside. I can, for example, click on that and see that this line is affected. One thing I can also do is, for example, create a confidential issue from that so that someone needs to take care about it. This is also possible. And what else do we have? We have, I think I want to go back. There is something around, I added a method which does something which you normally don't do. And this is also like to detect certain things which could potentially like leak credentials or permissions or something else around it. Okay, this is about security. And so to speak, what's next? What's interesting even more if you want to go advanced or want to say, hey, this is important for my development workflows, for my DevOps journey. You can use the environments with staging and production. Look into review apps, what could be useful for your environment or for your application, for your development, what you need. The other thing is GitOps, which means like infrastructure as code, managing your either Kubernetes, looking into Terraform as an automation layer, or even Ansible. Monitoring is always a big part, and observability. You totally want to, like, when a pipeline is always similar, like you write code and you refactor code, you improve it, you learn things. And the same goes with pipeline efficiency, which is linked over here. This is a documentation which we wrote last year or added last year around optimizing the pipeline runtimes, failing fast, oftentimes optimizing some caching, the Docker image size, and so on. Incident management is also a big part, which we are like adding the possibility to receive alerts from external endpoints, providers, and managing the incidents directly in GitLab. And last but not least, next to all the security stuff, for code scanning for the code itself, the ops team or the ops part should also be mentioned with managing secrets, for example, with HashiCorp Vault, and not hard coding any credentials or secrets anywhere else. Other than that, this is basically what I planned for today. The rest, which I will be like skipping over now for a bit, is something which I would recommend for you to practice by yourself. And let me just go over there, and you probably have it open already. There are some tips around merge requests, how this can be optimized, or how you want to use that. There is also a way of like using push options in your CLI. Totally interesting. I wish I would have known that 5 years ago. Other than that, there is practice how you can automatically close an issue when a merge request gets merged. Super nice workflow. Also, like reviews work with suggesting things. So when you're editing something, you can make inline suggestions, and the author can apply it or someone else, which makes the workflow more convenient. And adding this to an apply workflow and approve workflow, so when everything is working out. And there are some tips inside with some checklists in the merge request template. If you're looking for real world examples, please check out how we do it at GitLab. We have certain merge request and issue templates around, which are long, but they're useful. Yeah, and when everything works out, practice how you want to do releases, how the workflow is, how you feel confident around this. Jumping from the releases back to tests a little bit, test coverage reports for you to practice with some more detailed instructions how this can work. And what else do we have? Oh, we have actually examples how to add a new function and then add some tests and see how the test coverage evolves over time. And last but not least, we have the batches. So you don't need to edit the README MD. You can just go to your project settings and add the SVG integration. Yeah, and last but not least, there are some certain tips from which I get asked all the time. And so I decided to add them over here as well, like Git branch best practices from my experience over the past years with release branches, support branches, and so on. And other than that, if you want to, for example, jump into personal access tokens and integrations. Oh, and I think I made it a KDE. I copied those slides from a KDE workshop I provided around GitLab last year. The GitLab, the personal access token can be defined for specific scopes, for example. So like only having access to the REST API, read, write, or read, because the reason why we want to use that is we want to interact with the REST API, and there are certain API clients for specific languages and libraries around. I'm a fan of Python, of the Python GitLab library, but there are certainly others around. Super convenient not to having to write the JSON requests and HTTP requests on your own all the time. It's just wrapped around. Other than that, there is a CLI tool developed by our amazing community called GLab, where you can manage merge requests, interact with the code, and so on. Can install it, and more tests and reports. This is something else. And last but not least, everything which is about efficiency and CI analytics and monitoring. Some more insights, and also the CI pipelines exporter, which could look like this in your Grafana, for example, if you're using Prometheus and the exporter. This is also linked in the efficiency docs. The other thing is like failing fast. So when your CI/CD is blocking, for example, the code quality scan runs 7 minutes in my tests, but the format job doesn't work. So it makes sense to do it in a different way and optimize the CI/CD cost. Yeah, and I think I have listed too many tips and tricks here. The metrics builds for parallel job execution has been added a couple of releases ago, making your life easier as well. It can be totally useful if you, for example, want to generate RPM on Debian packages for different architectures, just by providing an array list of that or a metrics. Yeah, directed acyclic graph for speeding up the critical path of your execution pipeline. This is a thing to look into. And also everything which can be optimized with container image creation, creating Docker images, which already include the build chain, which got better over time. So you can actually use, I think there are certain Debian images, for example, which incorporate the build chain with GCC, so compiling C and C++ code, for example, and so on. Container registry is also a different thing to keep in mind. Document and share everything. And yeah, produce useful errors for anyone looking into the CI/CD job output. And document it. Document everything. That's good when you know where you want to look at. Yeah, and with that, I think. Oh, 1 hour. Thanks for your attention. I would open it up for questions. If you need anything, you can like tag me on You can tag me on Twitter, write me a DM. Looking forward what you learned or which questions you have. Other than that, yeah, thanks for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Michael. It's been a fantastic introduction to GitLab, and I actually learned many tricks that I had never seen, never knew about. So that's really cool. So we've got a few questions. So there was one that Arno answered during the talk, which is how much resources would I need to run my private GitLab instance in my cluster? And Arno referred this question directly to the documentation. So it's 4 GB of RAM recommended as a minimum. So that's the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I would also point to the docs, to be honest.
Exactly.
GitLab as an all-in-one experience requires certain resources. Give it 4 GB to make it happy. If you're trying to scale it up, like in a larger environment and saying I want to use, for example, a distributed environment with different instances all over the globe, or maybe like, yeah, you have 10,000 developers, maybe, or even more than that. Give it resources. We have ongoing projects to optimize the performance of GitLab itself, and also, for example, Puma reduced the memory usage and things around this. So it's recommended to give it as much as possible, of course, but for starting, I would totally recommend 4 GB.
Perfect. That's good. So there are two open questions, very interesting ones. So the first one is there a way to include a mandatory GitLab CI YML file in the CE edition? For example, if I want to have a certain stage mandatory for all projects in a group, is that something that it's doable?
You mean to always have a CI configuration file available for all projects?
For example, if you have your group, you want to enforce a certain set of practices or testing, or I can imagine a few scenarios where you would like as a manager to make sure that all of the teams contributing to in a particular group have a default, let's say, GitLab CI YML file that it's automatically included in every new project in that group. That's how I understand this, and I actually could imagine a certain usefulness. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just looking or just Googling at the background. I know that you can, for example, disable or you can the other way around. You can define a remote GitLab CI configuration file in your project settings, which then will be used. The thing is, I need to find the documentation and figure out in which, if it's available. Give me a second. GitLab. So I'm a developer. I'm Googling everything. I just need to be fast.
Absolutely.
In project settings. And to be honest, GitLab has so many features, and with me starting in March and before that, I've been learning and providing trainings, but there were still like questions like this one where I say, yeah, I've heard it somewhere, but I need to look it up.
So I have the person, Magnus Lübeck, the person who is asking the question, raised his hand. So I'm going to allow him to talk. So maybe he can explain directly the purpose of the question. Magnus, you should be able to talk right now.
Hello. Thank you. You can hear me maybe?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So I read about this feature in the licensed version. So I think there is quite easy ways to make mandatory that certain pipeline steps are run before your own CI GitLab CI file is run. Used, for example, for compliance reasons. I think it's very common in bigger organizations like banks, insurance companies, that a developer cannot skip certain steps that just has to be run. Because the GitLab CI file is, of course, editable by more or less anyone. So that is sort of the question that for some open source projects where you can't afford the paid version, you might want to have, maybe not for compliance reasons, where I can understand that you would like to pay for it, but for your own hobby projects that you have your favorite pipeline step that you would just like to include in every project that you have?
I think so. One thing, if you have an open source project, you can totally apply for the open source program and get a free license of the enterprise edition. This is something you can do. The other thing is for compliance reasons. And as you mentioned it, I couldn't find it right now, but I remember a discussion around this. I think it's available in the project settings. I think it's the custom CI configuration path, probably. Project if needed. And let me share my screen again. It's easier. This is the correct one. Oh, there's the share button. I'm thinking about not this one. It should be using. Okay, it's moved away. The custom CI configuration path. This was added, introduced for external locations. This should be able to override this. Let me go over here.
It's not super important to find the solution. It was more if you knew it from the top of your head, and then because I know the feature exists in the paid version. It's just that I don't know exactly if it was available in the free version.
Sorry for doom scrolling. I just wanted to figure out 12.6 because I remember it from, I think, this issue or something around it. I will just copy it in the Zoom chat. I think you can forcefully override this. The only thing which I cannot answer right now is in which version it's included. Mm-hmm. It's custom configuration path. Wondering. Oh, okay. We can customize the path settings, CI/CD, provide a custom safety changes. This happens inside over here. Probably, if you haven't done so, try this one out. But yeah, I've seen a comment in the chat that probably it's in the paid version.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just cannot figure out how the feature is called right now.
Oh, I'm very happy with this. Also agree with Simon in the chat that, of course, in community projects, you don't really want to have someone used to whipping people's asses. It was more for a personal preference if I have my own favorite steps that I always want to include.
I'm thinking of if you, maybe you could. One thing you probably could automate it in a way of saying, hey, you have your template group or your template project somewhere, which enforces that and is publicly accessible. And then you're using CI schedules, which is a cron job actually. And you kind of check via the API whether someone tried to override this. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it sounds a bit workaroundish, but you can sort of like do some compliance by yourself. You could also like write a cron job which checks the REST API every 5 seconds to ensure that the specific setting is not overridden. This is also compliance, but not it's not how you sell it to someone, but you can like make it happen.
Yeah. And in a private project, I can use and include in every GitLab CI file if I want to.
Yeah, you can. I think, if you're working with roles and protected branches, you could also like say, hey, only trusted members can merge to the master or to the main branch, to the default branch. And within your merge requests, you need to define a check that no one can like modify the GitLab CI configuration file. So that the review process includes that there is a certain check being run or a task list in the merge request template and saying, hey, you're not allowed to modify this and no change in that regard will be accepted from a community contribution, for instance. We probably, I don't know how we handle that, but I don't think we would like merge something which changes our CI configuration. So this is also like training your contributors and defining a process in like the merge request reviews and saying, hey, don't fix everything or touch everything in a merge request, only what you want to fix. And if you want to adjust something in the CI configuration, please create a different merge request, and this like gets assigned a specific reviewer, which then says, okay, I'm trusting this and this can be added.
Cool.
This is something I could think of.
We've got another question from Mikola Jam. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm sorry if I mispronounce it. Where are templates included from? Can I browse them? And can I freeze the version of a template in my repo?
That's an interesting question.
I've just given Mikola access. He can basically talk. If you would like to expand your question, Mikola, please feel free to intervene.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I think I've written everything I was going to ask. So, the first part is like it looks a little bit like a magic. We have this include template with some files that don't exist in my repository, and it works. And second part about freezing the version, it may be required. I can think about some cases that may be required, like if we would like to have the control over those updates.
Good idea. This is something I don't know. Or I need to look it up. One thing I want to explain is, and this is some magic which also like was a little bit weird to me in the first place. I just like I need to find the right screen sharing. So one thing, like the documentation says, you can include templates and you can like include built-in templates. The thing is it linked over here? Yeah, it's linked already. So GitLab on .com and also in the self-hosted version provides templates by default, and this is shipped within the source code and being made available, for example, from the editor. So the Golang template, which we've been using, is one of that. But there are also others like the security testing, security scanning, and for example, AutoDevOps uses the same mechanism in the background. And the interesting thing is, and I have this, sorry, going back over here. I wanted to copy it into the chat so you can follow along. Oops. And this basically puts us into the overview of the templates. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of them. One thing which we have been using is the Go template, which is just over here. So you can either, for example, inspect it over here and reuse it or copy certain parts, or just like use the official way of including a template. The other interesting thing is there is, for example, the security subfolder, and this, for example, includes all the secret scanning and security scanning and so on. And this is basically where the magic happens. So it uses a specific Docker image, which we provide. There are certain techniques in YAML or in the CI configuration, which is like, this is a template or like a skeleton provider, and you can use extends to import that into a job description. If you're going to look into that, let me see, 3 YAML tips. This was the blog post. This is something where this is described a little bit more in detail, how to use it in practice. Just go over here. Yeah, can try it out and say, hey, I don't want to write it all the time. For example, defining the image or defining the script, you can let the jobs extend the template. So it's a job template in a specific sense. Other things which are interesting and to have a look at is, for example, the rules language, which can get quite overwhelming. This is the way to control and say, hey, this job should only be executed when the default branch matches the commit branch, for example. Was it the other way around? you can control, for example, saying, hey, when this is a merge request, I want to execute a specific job, which does some more checks. And when it's like, when the pipeline or the job is triggered in the main or master branch, you, for example, trigger an automated deployment to production if you want to, for example, manage that in that way. So these are basically the CI templates, and they are also developed over time. So if you really want to like freeze it in your own environment, say, hey, I don't want to always use what's in development over there, you can just like can download the file or copy the file content in your own CI template repository and manage it over there. And then, for example, use the possibility to, which document? Do we have the documentation open? I think it was this history. You have the possibility to not only use include template, but to, for example, to use include remote, which means you have a public repository and you just say, hey, remote and this URL and fetch that from your central CI template repository. There is a way to include custom templates in your own installation, but to my knowledge, that's in the enterprise version. It should be linked somewhere. Custom templates. Custom level templates. Project templates. No, project templates or something else. Too many features. Oftentimes, in terms of freezing, if you really want to control what's going on, I would recommend to establish a review process similar as you would develop code or source code, and saying, hey, this is the central repository for our CI templates, and everyone is forced to use them and not just what GitLab provides. And if, for example, there is a new release of GitLab, we are doing a diff or an automated diff from a job, and you get like a report and saying, oh, I'm acknowledging these changes, or I'm like rejecting them and I don't want to use them. This is something you can do. Does that help? Hopefully.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We've got one more question, two more questions right now. One from Flavio Marchi, and is MLOps supported somehow? I will give Flavio there we go. You can ask your question directly, Flavio.
Okay, thanks. Well, the question is pretty clear. Just out of curiosity, as for DevOps, even for the machine learning / ops, there is some support, and in what extent?
It's a good question. That's, to be honest, it's not my area. I'm still learning in that regard. Is there a specific framework you're looking into machine learning, or you're just like starting?
Oh no, nothing specific. It's just to see, because basically we are bringing GitLab in our corporation, and we have a pretty big machine learning team, and they will be really keen to eventually exploit the GitLab functionality for the ops part, or for the operational part. And yeah, I was just trying to figure out from my side, how to answer to this kind of expectation.
Then I'd love to give a shout out to my amazing teammate René Hoferichter in the chat, who answered that for me right now. This is a blog post which was recently published around machine learning and CI/CD. I would recommend checking this one out and trying it out. It looks interesting. To be honest, I haven't checked it out yet. The thing is, probably it's amazing when I just have to click links. Data science, I think, whatever, data ops. There's a video. Oh, interesting. No, we're not watching the video now.
Precisely, René is raising his hand, so I will give him. There we go.
Oh yeah,
René.
that's even better.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just I'm not going to be able to be very in depth here, but I'm tending to enterprise customers in this region. And just in the last couple of months, the whole machine learning, data mining, business intelligence, these topics, they came up more and more in communications. And it seems like that in other areas of the world, other colleagues are further on. I know that in Asia Pacific, there was end of last year, we had a session, a special team taking part in a machine learning event. So it's definitely a topic, but currently it is not something that we have so much here, at least not so much knowledge in depth side of. But as you can see, it is definitely one of the use cases where GitLab is also used. Would that is that something? What kind of things are you looking for if you say MLOps? Is what you have seen or what I posted going in the direction, or is that something completely different?
No, actually, right in this direction. I cannot, because I'm not, a data scientist myself. More on the system engineering side. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as I said, as we are bringing GitLab up to speed within our corporation for the DevOps part, and we have a very relatively huge for our corporation machine learning team that is growing, and I had already collected different feedback from them. They're really keen to see the potentiality for even GitLab, probably because they are more self-aware than me that that can be the case, as you mentioned. Maybe from the other side of the world, they're more active on that. But we are just experiencing now to bring the DevOps via GitLab in our system engineering team, especially working in data security. But then we have this machine learning team that is even keen to experience. That's why my question was not really specific on some tech stack from the machine learning side, because not my my competence. But yet, I was just curious to see how eventually we can open this solution, GitLab on-prem, even for our machine learning team.
Mm-hmm. One thing I could think of, and I'm not really sure if we get there in 2021, having sort of machine learning or code intelligence. You make mistakes often, and then machine learning detects that pattern and says kind of automatically creates a merge request fixing the problems. Or some other machine learning I'm dreaming of is you want to have certain application performance monitoring or CI/CD tracing. So you have some spans and traces, you see which request takes long in your application. And adding those measurements and points in your code as a developer is like, if you're not trained to that, it's cumbersome. It's like it's not efficient. And if we kind of get some like Kraken or machine learning around this and saying, hey, the robot or the bot does automatically add certain instrumenting to the code, this would totally be awesome. The problem or the thing is, I don't know how to make this happen. But I would love to have more automation in our code to make it even easier to, for example, monitor it or instrument it, or just like prevent bad design patterns or bad code patterns from happening, because there is a a bot out there which knows about this pattern.
Great. Thanks. Thanks a lot for the interventions. And we have one more question from Mohamed Habas. Is there a way to direct the computing of the build, unit test, etc., to a self-hosted cluster? I'm going to give Mohamed again the possibility to talk. So Mohamed, feel free to ask or to expand your question if you want.
Hi. Sorry, you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I was wondering, like, is there a way to use GitLab to basically just project and basically like take the responsibility of computing or whatever, like whatever kind of like a repetitive task that I have to do for myself? Is there a gateway from GitLab to like my own environment, let's say?
So you mean that you're using GitLab.com and add your own runners and your own clusters, or just everything self-hosted?
No, I just want to like use GitLab just like as a source control, but nothing more. I don't want to use it for continuous integration. You know, like just like a general question, like is there a way to extend GitLab, let's speak to just like ship the jobs onto my setup, let's say.
So you mean that when you want to trigger an external CI/CD system, so to speak? Is that what you're looking for?
Sorry, you cut off a bit.
I mean, something around webhooks. So when a specific event happens, that you, for example, trigger an external Tekton pipeline or something else.
Yeah.
I think, was it Spinnaker or Tekton? GitLab Tekton. I've seen something in that regard. Oh, it was a Cube. Was it the KubeCon talk? I think it was the KubeCon talk. Support Tekton pipeline. This is something else. Can GitLab webhooks be used for triggering? I think this is one of the ways. You could also trigger, for example, if you have your GitLab repository and you want to trigger GitHub actions, this should be doable via webhooks, and vice versa. You have a GitHub repository and you want to make use of GitLab CI/CD, for example. This is also something, and webhooks play a big part in this integration, and also the REST API. Tekton trigger. Okay, I think this is the same one. I think it's doable, but I think there is not a single-click application which does that for you right now. Another way I could think of is, for example, using GitLab CI/CD, but actually triggering the pipeline from the executed job, like using the script function and script keyword, and then saying, hey, I want to remotely trigger the Tekton API, wait for the job, do something around that. Another way, maybe writing a custom executor for the GitLab runner, which provides the different states which are then required. This is done for the is it the AWS container Fargate integration, I think. Custom executor, but this is a pretty much advanced thing to do. Custom executor. So the system it's meant to be extendable in a way of using different executors for the jobs then. Maybe it's an entry point to incorporate it more deeply with Tekton, but I'm not sure about this. This is just like experimental thinking right now. Probably the webhooks are the first step to look into.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mohammed. Thanks, Michael. And we have a raised hand by Dan. I will give him the. Dan, you can speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All good. No, I wanted just to add to the question that was previously mentioned. Basically, you could watch for the webhook events when somebody pushes code to the repository and triggered CI from there. It's just you have to build your own watcher. So if you're trying to use GitLab and to execute something on push, most likely you would have to use the CI, like the GitLab CI YAML. We used to have
Then we
build on Google Cloud Build, or if you want to really build your own events, because they do expose everything.
Unfortunately, we lost half of what you said.
I'm sorry. So to push events, you basically have to build your own watcher, since GitLab exposes a lot of the events. So you can just listen to any type of different code event, so such as a push. And if you really want to trigger that from your own pipeline, we used to have GitLab trigger on the free and shared runners a Google Cloud build on our runners on Google Cloud. So that was an option. So if you have free credits on Google Cloud, it works really well.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
Great. Thanks a lot for the
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And there's more comments on the chat as well. Rene as well has been commenting during this conversation, so there might be some interesting points as well there. So we still have a little bit of time. I don't know if somebody would like to have one last question, some item that might be interesting for you, for your organization, for your team. Take the opportunity. The brains are here. You can ask them questions live.
Yeah, maybe I was talking too fast and triggered an overflow. I'm sorry about that. When I'm passionate, I'm just like talking.
No, but that's okay. That's okay. It was very good content, and the good thing is that we have both the code and the slides available. They are in the chat, so please, everybody, make sure that you download a copy of them. And if there are no more questions, I would say thank you so much, Michael. It's been a really, really fantastic first meetup for this GitLab group. And yeah, thanks again. And thanks everyone for participating. I think it was fantastic, the interventions, the questions, everybody with their own approaches and problems. And I think that's very, very, very nice to hear how people are using GitLab in their own environment. We are going to, I'm going to quickly close this by telling you that please stay tuned on our vision.tv channel. We are going to be publishing this video in the next few days. And on the meetup group, we are going to publish a date for the second edition of this meetup. And again, thanks a lot for your participation, and see you soon in our next meetup group. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.